Hello and welcome back to Frontington Backwoods Railway. Today I'm continuing to modify this old 5700 class locomotive. This is actually one of my oldest models. It's nearly as old as I am, in fact. It's one of the Great Western Railway's iconic 57XX pannier tank engines. This particular one was produced by Replica Railways, although if you do look on the bottom it does say Bachmann. In fact, this tooling was used by Replica Railways mainline and the early Bachmann models too. The mechanism inside is rather old by today's standards, being a split chassis arrangement. This one is actually running very roughly and noisily, so it's in need of a good service, but that'll be a topic for another video. Now, eagle-eyed viewers may spot that I've actually already made a few modifications to this model, so let me just run through what I've done so far. Now, starting at the bottom, I've made a few, visual improvements to the wheels. If you look at one of these in original condition, you'll notice that the wheels and connecting rods are very shiny. It's almost a reflective metal, which to my eye makes it look very toy-like. So I've remedied this by just painting the wheels black, which immediately helps a lot. And as for the connecting rods, I've used a silver permanent marker, which dulls the reflective look quite a lot, whilst still looking like metal. And comparing it to photos of the full-scale versions, I think this makes it look a lot more realistic. Moving up slightly, you'll see that I've picked out some of this pipework using a copper-coloured permanent marker, like this one. I actually really like using these marker pens. They're easy to get hold of, they're easy to control, and they cover really nicely on plastic, on this moulded detail. Sticking with the marker pens, on the top, I've coloured in the safety valve cover, which was originally green plastic, and also picked out the whistles and the window frames in gold. And finally, I've added a nice real coal load into the bunker, on top of the original moulded plastic. It's arguably just a little bit overloaded, but that's an issue that most models have, even when they're new. This at least looks a little bit more realistic. They say nothing looks more like coal than coal. So, what's next? Well, first of all, while I like this pipework picked out under the tanks, the surrounding area just looks a little bit too bright and plasticky for my liking. Looking at photos of the real thing, this area is often in shadow and usually more grubby than the sides of the tanks, for example. So I'm just going to use some weathering powders to dull down that whole area under there. Now, this model may be a really old design, but you can at least see some daylight underneath the tanks there, under the boiler, which is good. But what you can't see is any valve gear. You can just about see the top of the split chassis though, so what I'm going to try and do is put a little bit of red paint just in there. Obviously it won't look like the actual inner workings, but hopefully the red on its own will make it look just a little bit more interesting. Speaking of red, take a look at that reverser handle. Looking at photos of real locomotives, this isn't actually quite right. It should be red on the shaft and polished silver on the handle where you put your hands. It should also be a little bit shorter, I think. At the moment it's more like head height. And as someone helpfully pointed out to me, it's backwards. This should all be fairly straightforward to fix though, just by cutting it out, repainting it and fixing it back in place. And while we're looking at the cab, I say while we're looking at it, I'm pretty sure it's all in shadow at the moment, there's no detail in there. There's not really much I can do about that. However, what you can see from certain angles is the white sides of the motor. So that's definitely something I can fix with a bit of black paint. So that's all I've got on my list so far. So I'm going to get cracking. I'll fast forward through this though, as it might be a little bit tedious. So I'll join you again when it's finished. So there we go. I think that's all done for now. I'm pretty pleased with the way that's turned out. Those areas underneath the tanks are looking much grubbier now. Yeah, that looks much better to my eye. The red underneath the inside where the action would be is a little bit difficult to see, especially on the camera. If I move my light around, you can just about make out that there's some red in there. It's easier to see with the naked eye, obviously. But yeah, I'm quite pleased with the way that that's turned out. And that reverser handle is now looking much better. I'm much happier with the position of that. So yeah, job well done, I think.